We are now 2 weeks in the most important trial of our freedom of speech. Julian Assange is still facing off against a kangaroo court in Old Bailey in London so that he can be extradited to the United States and face 175 years in prison. Among one of the highlights of this week, Daniel Ellsberg testified on day 6. For people who don't know, he is the man responsible for releasing the Pentagon Papers, which revealed war crimes committed by the U.S. during the Vietnam War. Professor John Slobato, who's the co-founder of Iraq Body Count, he testified today on day 8. And from the news that I've read by Consortium News and updates that Kevin Gostola has been putting up on Twitter and on Shadowproof, they keep trying to accuse Assange of doing things that aren't illegal, or they claim that he fits the description of something that is illegal even though it isn't. For example, today they were trying to extradite Assange for having a cavalier attitude, quote unquote, which isn't illegal. When he released the Iraq war logs, saying that he was careless and that he was going to put people's lives in danger. Nobody's lives were in danger. They were also saying that he can't stay under house arrest somewhere like the Ecuadorian embassy, because it would mean that he would be, quote unquote, escaping punishment. At one point, Assange got so frustrated with how ridiculous the court is right now that he yelled and he said that this is nonsense, and he received a warning to not yell out again. So Christy and Dat, can you fill us in on more details that have happened this week with the hearing?
Well, it's interesting that we are still discussing whether or not these leaks harmed people when the United States government has testified in the Chelsea Manning, which at that time was Bradley Manning trial back in, I believe, 2013. So we're still having the same discussion. We're still having the same discussion on who was careless and who wasn't. When we know for a fact that we have firsthand account that Julian Assange was the only one who cared about any kind of redactions on those cables, and was the only one that warned the State Department when they were released on the internet, not by WikiLeaks. They were released because 2 Guardian reporters put out a book and carelessly put in the password to access those cables, and then they were released. We know the Der Spiegel, the Guardian, the New York Times were more concerned about the deadlines and did not care about redactions. So why aren't they on trial? Why aren't they facing any sort of indictment? If the United States government wants us to believe that they are so thoughtful and care so much about the what ifs when those cables were released, why aren't those publishing outfits on trial right now?
Because nobody actually cares. Like, nobody actually cares about any of the information that was actually revealed in those cables. It's just that the American government has reached a point of absolute insanity. I've been saying this for a year and a half in articles published at overwritten.org, that it is completely impractical for the American government to pursue this case against Julian Assange. All it does is create opportunities for conversations like the one we're having right now, where people can take an opportunity to educate themselves on what WikiLeaks has actually revealed over the past decade and a half. If the American government just looked the other way and said, yeah, we're perfectly fine with the information they're releasing, the public would have much less of an incentive to actually care about it, because the government would have plausible deniability and would be able to say, oh, yeah, see, we have nothing to hide. But by pursuing this case, the government is attempting to issue a warning to people that approved publishers are the only ones who are allowed to release scandalous information, and the unapproved outlets who do not have a corrupt, incestuous relationship to the state do not have the same publishing privileges.
So, Charles and Israel, I'm curious to hear your commentary on this stuff. What do you think about the updates that me, Christy, and Dak gave about the hearing? Israel, your mic is off.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I do give credit to everything everybody said there. I think, I want to also say that, wasn't it on Tucker Carlson's show, Glenn Greenwald from The Intercept went on there and mentioned something about Snowden and Assange?
He did, for sure.
He kind of was trying to plead with Trump to make that move, but he's a buffoon. Donald Trump is frustrating because you want to support the guy. He's got progressive qualities on foreign policy, sure. But, everybody who goes after Obama, too, you have to acknowledge the fact that on President Trump's desk was an opportunity to end the Yemen genocide that was happening from the Saudi Arabian Wahhabi extremists over in Saudi Arabia, right? Who have basically accelerated all of this jihadist stuff all across the Middle East. And what did Donald Trump do? Because he did those amazing arms deal that, enriched the middle of the country, sure, parts where, Charles is at, plenty of, Raytheon, plenty of Boeing, plenty of that happening down there. So that constituency wasn't going to let him, even though this was pushed by, I think, Dick Cheney's daughter as well, in partnership with like progressives and Democrats. It was a pretty, bipartisan? Yeah, it was a pretty bipartisan thing, and Trump vetoed that. So, he deserves as much criticism for that as well. But this could be an opportunity for him to do something, right? But I don't think he's going to do it. I don't know if maybe other people have more faith in Trump to actually pardon Assange and Snowden. It would be a good move on him, but he hasn't been doing those lately.
I think he is more likely to take the advice of the last person he heard. So I think even though he listened to Tucker Carlson's segment with Glenn Greenwald, he might have had a conversation with someone in his administration or somebody else who is a government hack, and they're gonna tell him no, don't do it, because they're gonna just give him all these like intelligence, CIA and FBI talking points. What do you think, Charles?
Yeah, honestly, if Donald Trump was going to do the right thing and take some action, in my opinion, to pardon Julian Assange, we would already have seen it. It's kind of like I said, last week. Really, he owes the guy. He should have, but the fact that he hasn't done it, I don't think he's going to, and I think it's an absolute shame. Just to put it in a comparison here, I think right now, and this is sad to say, I think Julian Assange stands about as much chance as getting a pardon from Trump as Hillary Clinton did on actually getting prosecuted by Donald Trump. Because remember, he was going to do that too, right? And actually, it turns out that in his first 4 years, he faced more chances of prosecution himself than Hillary Clinton actually did. So, without a doubt, Trump, if the leaked audio tapes that the mainstream media has been ranting and raving about has shown one thing, it really just seals the deal. Donald Trump says one thing when he's out there trying to hype up a base, and turns out at the time Julian Assange was just good fuel for his war against Hillary Clinton, really fueled that fire in his argument, okay? That's all Julian Assange was to it. He's got that thing, he's got his position he promotes to his audience, and then when he gets behind the scenes, not surprising, most politicians do, he has a completely different tone, and now we've seen that for sure.
I should say that in the aforementioned interview I did with Daniel Burke, he did try to make the argument that Donald Trump is likely to pardon Julian Assange at some point. He pointed out the fact that Glenn Greenwald appeared on Tucker Carlson, which is allegedly Trump's favorite news commentary program, just a few days after Trump retweeted Glenn Greenwald's criticism of the military-industrial complex. Now, I did challenge Burke on this point. I pointed out that there's been an abundance of evidence to suggest that Donald Trump supports the military-industrial complex, but he does believe that a pardon for Snowden and or Assange is quite possibly coming down the pike. I'd refer people to that video if they want to hear the arguments for themselves. It's not an argument with which I necessarily agree, but I did think it was fair to bring up that he did make, I thought, an intelligent argument for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that interview out. Trump is a loose cannon, but like I said, I think he tends to listen to the last person who's in the room. Like the attack on Soleimani was the result of him listening to the wrong people. It's probably the last person he spoke to. But if the last person he spoke to was Tucker Carlson, then he doesn't go ahead and attack Iran like what happened last year. Earlier in 2019, not later in 2019. Oh no, that was in 2020. Wow, it's been a horrible year. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think the best thing we can do is just keep applying public pressure for Assange. But Christy and Dak, I do want to ask you if is there any way that Judge Vanessa Baraster and the jury can be convinced on finding Assange innocent?
From what we've seen thus far, I really honestly don't have a shred of hope for that. I mean, because really she's been one of the judges. There's been a couple others throughout this, what we're looking at 18 months now almost since he was arrested. And really every chance of giving Julian any sort of leniency or just following simple human rights in the situation has seemed to go the other way. And there always is this verdict that's already pre-written that is being read at the end of whenever the defense does make an argument for something to be better for him. So I really don't have any hope that we're just not on a direct train to extradition. Now, this will go to appeals, and I can't tell you what will happen in the higher courts in the UK. I don't have a lot of hope because they did not rule in his favor on his extradition to Sweden, which is why he went into the Ecuadorian embassy. So, as I've said before, depending on how the UC Global case in Spain shakes out, that could be something that would undeniably be looked at as a way to win this extradition hearing, but I'm not sure the timing of it all or if it will actually be taken seriously.
I don't believe that the Spanish surveillance firm will have much of an impact on the extradition hearing. I think that the extradition hearing is probably, as barbaric as the judge's behavior has been, the technocratic philosophy that governs the authoritarian globalist state would probably result in Assange just getting extradited to the United States, because it probably is within the parameters of these extremely unjust and authoritarian laws. So I don't have any hope that he avoids extradition. I think that the Spanish security firm's illegal surveillance of him could possibly be relevant once he's in the United States. But then again, we tend to forget that many of the people associated with WikiLeaks have said that if he's extradited to the United States, then he's as good as dead anyway. So this doesn't look like it's going to have much of a happy ending. I don't see how it could. It's just that the United States government will exploit this case to make Assange a martyr at some point in the future. There'll be a Julian Assange holiday 100 years from now if the American empire is still around. But yes, I do believe that his extradition is inevitable. I do believe it's going to be one of the chief tragedies of American history, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop fighting it, because it's important to raise awareness or to do whatever we can. But yeah, I do believe that he will be in the Virginia court system at some point before too terribly long.
I think they have said sometime during this week that there's a chance he could be on remand for 3 years in the United States before a trial even starts here. We all know that his health hasn't been great through all of this. So you can imagine 3 more years in some sort of solitary confinement conditions would not be great for him. And once again, we could be going through a saga, even if it isn't 3 years, where his lawyers don't have access to him, and it's a hard, lawyer-client privilege isn't really even followed through so that he can prepare any kind of defense.
The amount of harm that they've already caused to him psychologically and physically have already taken life away from him, like years away from his life. So even if he were to stay somewhere safe, away from the torture that he's going through now, he's not going to live as long as he was going to had he not been arrested and tortured. So it truly is sad, like how you guys say, wherever, like I do see like 100 years from now, like us having like a holiday for Assange, given all the heroic things that he's done in exposing the truth. And I really hope that, do you think that WikiLeaks will continue, or do you think that it will get taken down?
Yes, that's why I think it's really important is to keep talking about his case, to keep correcting the smears and setting the record straight, is because WikiLeaks is still functioning. WikiLeaks will continue to publish and release material, and I think if we as a society do not look at this as a big, big warning sign of what's to come, then we really truly are lost if we cannot see where this is leading us.
So I wanted to bring up this this issue of a lot of mainstream media still being very silent about this issue. I wanted to bring up this excellent statement that Caitlin Johnstone made in a Medium article that I can link in the description, regarding all the news outlets that are still not covering this story. She said that news reporters and news outlets are showing us what they are right at this moment. If they are not speaking out for Assange's freedom right now, they are telling you that his prosecution poses no threat to them. They are telling you that they never plan on doing anything that might hold power to account with light of truth. They are telling you that they will side with power every time. They are telling you they are propagandists. And I'll throw it over to my panel here of what you guys think about those words by Caitlin Johnstone.
Yeah, to some extent, that's true. I think that it's a lot simpler than that. They're just corporations, that are responding to the market, and that market is demanding this type of politics. This is the type of stuff that the audience is consuming. So to a certain extent, it's like going after Disney for the niche that they fulfill. We have independent media who has to struggle through similar things when deciding what stories to cover, because of the parameters of the company that provides you a platform. As far as the legality of it, yeah, I think that publishers need to be held accountable a lot stricter. So I actually am supportive of like a libel situation, like in Europe, where like Trump says, you can actually hold these people accountable, because at the end of the day, they're corporations and they're all lawyered up. So that's the only means. So on that, I agree with actually the president.
So I think that quote was spot on. People are afraid to break out of this conformity and stand up for what is right. And I think, Charles, it looked like you were agreeing with that as well. What do you think?
Absolutely. To me, the quote was spot on, and here's why. Okay. While we've got the mainstream media out there telling us all about Trump's private and public opinion from his leaked audio tapes, while we're hearing about how many porn stars he may or may not have slept with, all the things we hear on our quote-unquote news today, and then they talk about his war on journalists, right? Because he has bad things to say about Jake Tapper or Anderson Cooper or whomever, right? Because he says mean things or tweets out nasty tweets to these journalists. There's a war on journalism, yet they won't actually say a damn thing about the journalist who's actually doing more to educate the people than they are. Okay? Yep. So if you're going to talk about a real war on journalism, maybe let's talk about a journalist who's actually being taken to war right now, not you little snowflakes in the mainstream media that don't like Trump's tweets. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just the mainstream media, though. It's also local media.
No,
the way they do it is they sensationalize like the crime.
They're all controlled by the same corporation.
Yeah.
And that was your point, though, Israel. You said that they're providing a niche to what the viewers want. Well, I would argue that in a way and say they've conditioned people into expecting this is the news, because they've been slowly feeding you more and more and more propaganda over the years. At one point, we actually had some kind of a news, right? But no, now it's just TMZ basically 24/7. You don't really get news from the mainstream media. And that's why it's so hard to break people away from the Democrats and the Republicans at the end of the day, is because mainstream media, local media, the whole 9 yards, they're all in bed together. They're going to come on TV. They're going to misinform you. They're going to cost you brain cells. They're going to make you more stupid. And then in the middle of it, they're going to tell you what pill you need to go tell your doctor to buy.
I think that in a non-corporate world, this would be receiving a lot of ratings if the mainstream media was talking about this. But they're restricted again, because like we all know, in Israel, you had some truths there. It's because they are restricted by the corporations, and they're going to do what will make ratings for the corporations rather than what will hurt them. Because this case it hurts the corporations if Assange is freed because it goes against the corporation's interests.
And that's why you saw TYT's hesitance after a $20 million infusion of Series A fundraising that they did. I wouldn't even pay 1 second of a mind if it were anything else, right? If it was a race car app or something, I don't care. Go raise your money. I'm a capitalist, so I don't mind that. But the way TYT does it, I do think that there's a validity in the argument that people say, okay, but you're also, almost like, on purposely misrepresenting things and trying to gaslight. That's the word I'm looking for. Just it's the obvious gaslighting that people, I think, have a big problem with.
Yeah, you can understand. Sorry.
Imagine if every journalist, local, national, what have you, was talking about Julian Assange right now. Imagine the public support that could be raised in America if every journalist stood up for even that tiny shred of journalism that they still represent in their covering the news. If they were speaking his name and talking about what is happening inside the UK right now, and the people that are conditioned to listen to the mainstream bullshit day in and day out really knew what was happening. Could you imagine what this country would say and do if they actually cared and if they actually knew?
Exactly. Yeah. And Israel, like, you bring up points that help us understand why the mainstream media is not covering it, but that shouldn't take away from people like us here who disagree with them not taking the moral high ground, and us trying to put a nudge on them and be like, hey, look, you're damaging yourself, you're causing harm to yourself. They're going to suppress you if you say the wrong thing. So Dak, what do you have to say about this quote?
Well, this is why I had to go up and ask all of those Democratic presidential candidates how they felt about Julian Assange, because the media wasn't doing its job. I mean, it's pretty pathetic that someone had to sneak into these events and go ask the question just because the media couldn't be bothered. But of course, the media could eventually be bothered. In August of last year, the New York Times published an article wherein the Democratic presidential candidates were asked where they stood on the Assange question, and they gave some platitudinous, nebulous response talking about how they believe in the freedom of the press and how Amy Klobuchar's dad had some job at a newspaper company or something like that. But then you could see that they had a very different tone when I asked them directly how they felt about Assange. It's because they knew how the information was going to be broadcast and how it was going to be received, and they didn't want to make themselves look weak, which is a wonderful synonym for virtuous, in the eyes of the military-industrial complex. So we see a lot of dishonesty here from these people because they're not actual human beings. They're just emissaries of the corporate state, they're emissaries of the intelligence agencies, and they're emissaries of the arms dealers. That's all they are. They're not actually real human beings. They're just spokesmen and women for Wall Street. And that's why I don't expect any results from them. And that's why the media has to try to basically conceal this issue to the best of their ability, because otherwise it would reveal how useless they are. Let's not forget that WikiLeaks revealed that the DNC pressured Chuck Todd not to talk about Bernie Sanders in a positive light because it might interfere with the DNC's plan to give Hillary Clinton the nomination. Who knows how much pressure was placed on the corporate media not to depict Bernie Sanders in a positive light this time around because it might interfere with Joe Biden's unnatural coronation. Yeah. I mean, who knows how deep it goes.
Jeez.
With that, though, we do have to head out of here now, so it's been great talking to everybody. We hope
great to see you again, man.
Shortly.
Thank you so much, Christy and Dak, for coming on.
Bye.
Thank you.